Good morning or good afternoon, everybody. We're glad you were able to join us for our webinar this morning. It's 11 o'clock in Chicago, so it's time for us to get going. Do this. Oh, there, I get to join. Okay, all right. So just a couple. I'm Betsy Hill, president of Brainware Learning Company. I want to welcome you to our webinar today. As we go along, if you have questions, we hope you will type them into the chat window, or you can type them into the Q&A area, whichever you prefer. We'll try and keep an eye on both of them. We are recording the session today. It is recording. It is, yes, it's recording. Got to double check that. If you are interested in a copy of the slides, I pasted a link that you can click on to download them. If you are looking at this as a recording later, you can just email us and we'll put our contact information at the end of the webinar so that you will be happy to send you a copy of the slides. If you have requested a certificate of participation for today's webinar, we will be processing those after the webinar, obviously, and you should see that within a week. So make sure to check your spam folder as well as your inbox for that. If you don't see it by, say, Tuesday of next week, then you could let us know and we will try to track that down. Today, I am really pleased to have a new presenter for our webinar series, Ann Fitz. Ann is the co-founder and CEO of Readable English, a program that makes English more predictably phonetic without changing the spelling of the words. It's a pretty ingenious approach. In that role, she draws on over 20 years of experience as a reading specialist, working with children with a variety of reading challenges, including phonological processing and language disorders, reading, writing, and math disorders, hyperlexia, and ADHD. So she's seen a lot. Early in her career, she was trained in the Linda Mood Bell system, and then subsequently founded her own learning center in the San Francisco Bay Area called the Reading Clinic. So we're glad to have Ann with us today. Oh, yes, no, this is right. So I'm just going to turn it, we're all ready. I'm going to turn it over to Ann.
Yep. Hi, thank you, Betsy, and it's really nice to be here with you all. Yeah, so I guess I'll just jump right in. So as many of you may know, English is one of the most difficult languages to learn to read. And we all know that the erratic spelling system is a major reason why, but a study was done, a cross-national study was done in Europe, as you can see the different languages here from Finnish to Danish, and these are ranked by how phonetic they are. And so what was done was after 1 year of their first year of school, students were tested on how well they could read words in their own language. And the more phonetic the language, the more accuracy they had in their reading after 1 year of instruction. And then when you get to French, Portuguese, Danish, a little less phonetic, a little less accuracy, but English, it drops dramatically down to about 35% of the words were read correctly after 1 year of instruction. So you can make a real prediction here, just looking at this chart, that it takes 2.5, 3 times longer to learn to read in English than it does in these other languages, because of the lack of consistency in the spelling and more than one sound per character and that kind of thing. So that's what I'm going to go into, is why this language is so difficult to learn to read. So in English, there are 42 phonemes, but only 26 letters. So what this means is letters are combined to make a sound, which are digraphs, and letters make more than one sound. As you can see, the letter U has 7 different sounds here. In fact, 13 out of the 26 letters in the language make more than one sound. And then letters are often silent, and we have no indication why or when the letter is going to be silent. And there's also a lack of consistency there, like in the word sign, the G is silent, but in related words like signature and signal, the G is not silent. It's also not always clear where syllable breaks occur. We teach SH as a digraph, but here obviously it's broken up. And the same with EA, but we don't say reality. And then converged and converted, there's only one letter difference, but one's a 2-syllable word and one's a 3-syllable word. So our syllabic structures also can be confusing and inconsistent. So what we do for this is we teach rules, right? So the standard sounds for the letters A, I, and O are A, I, then when we, can you click, Betsy?
Oh, sorry, yes.
Yeah. So then we need a rule for when the vowels say their names, right? Can you remember what the rule is for this? We've got the silent E rule, right? But then what about these exceptions? The rule doesn't often work. And we've got cove, love, and move, cone, gone, and none, five, and give, right? So we just got lots of exceptions for every rule. Same here. We've got our standard sounds ah. We need a rule for when A says A, E, and O. Anybody remember this rule? When two vowels go walking, the first does the talking.
You know, I have to say I never learned that as a rule.
Oh, you didn't?
I don't know. I certainly learned the silent E rule, but I don't remember, or maybe I learned it, but I just don't. I don't. It's pretty memorable because it's a little rhyme, but
yeah.
Anyway, I could pronounce them correctly, but I don't remember learning the rule explicitly.
Yeah, so then we have when the rule doesn't work, we've got very common words here. I see. We're missing some of the EA. There's like 10 different pronunciations for EA, for the EA. Anyway.
We don't say breek and Oshin?
Yeah, right. Exactly. There's also, anyway, there's a bunch more that you could find. And there's a lot of these. We teach patterns, and there's just a multitude of exceptions for each pattern that we learn. So, all right.
I remember there was a statistic about the percentage of the words, of common words in English that aren't pronounced, either with standard sounds or then according to these rules. And it's something like 50 or 70%, isn't it?
Yep, I'd say it's at least 50% of the words don't play fair, as we'd say. Yeah.
And that's when we're supposed to learn that in kindergarten. We learn to play fair, and then we violate that as soon as we get to first grade.
Yep. So here comes Readable English. This is basically addressing those very three things that we showed you here. And so if you want to click. What we do with Readable English is we add syllable breaks. So we dispel any of those inconsistencies here. And then with the silent letters, we gray them out. We'll leave them in there, but gray them out to tell the reader that those letters are not pronounced. And then we add a diacritical mark that we call a glyph over letters when they make a sound other than their usual sound. So you can see, like in the first two words, the CH, that digraph we teach is not even the true digraph. The H isn't pronounced, but the C is making its normal sound, right? But it's not in the next word recipe. The C is making this sound, so we add the silly C glyph to it. And the same with the I and the E that have the happy face glyph over it, because they're both saying the E sound. So you can see we've had this word at the top, chasm. We have our tech team. They have PhDs and they would say words like chasm, or they'd say genre instead of genre, like they just haven't had anybody tell them how those words were pronounced. So they sounded them out phonetically. So that's what readable English looks like. And so there's another example if we...
And I think I told you about one of my favorite ones, which is a high school classmate who gave a wonderful presentation in chemistry all about infrared radiation, because she was used to saying it's the ed at the end is just a d, instead of the fact that it was actually infrared, a 3-syllable word.
Yeah.
So your syllable breaks would have helped her for sure.
Yeah, that's a great example. All right, so imagine reading this word for the first time as a child, even though you might know it orally, you heard it. Here you can see the CH is grayed out altogether, and it has the Ozzy Oswald glyph over the A that has the aw sound. Ozzy Oswald says aw.
So I can't pronounce that yachet? I guess not. And certainly if you sound it out that way, you're going to have no way to connect it to the meaning of the word yacht, which you might be familiar with.
Right. So back to our examples of cove, love, and move, they're all going to have the silent E on it, but they'll each have a different marking on it to tell you that the dome glyph will tell you the O says O, and the upper cup glyph will tell you the O says in love, and the two moons will say oo, like in move. So so basically there's been other, the International Phonetic Alphabet is making English phonetic, or it's using its own symbols to demonstrate the sounds or how to sound a word out, but it looks like an alien language. I mean, you have to learn 2 systems in order to be able to sound that out. Then the next, when we see, the old days when we'd say, go look it up in a dictionary if you didn't know how to pronounce something, right? That's what we were told. And this is what it would look like. So the spelling is changed. And even the way we write the look at the is UH, not just U. Anyway, it's still not very, it doesn't really relate to the actual spelling of the word. So again, the pronunciation is learned separately than the actual sight word. When we learn the sight word, the spelling and the shape of the word.
Yeah, so these don't look anything like the actual words themselves.
No, they don't. And so you're, again, learning 2 systems in a way, or you're having to translate something here. And then with readable English, you can recognize the words still because the spelling's kept intact. And so this is what readable English looks like. So that spelling being kept intact is hugely important. Let's see, is there anything else I want to say here on this one? You can just say, there's a feedback loop. Yep, go ahead, Betsy, thanks. So with this, when we see a word, if we can connect that word, right? If we can pronounce it correctly the first time we see it, it's going to connect auditorily and it's going to connect to meaning. So when we see a word and we can pronounce it correctly, we can hear it, and then we can connect it to the word that we know the first time around. But imagine if you weren't able to pronounce that word correctly, and you were to say ligate, and even though you know the word light, it wouldn't connect to anything you would know. And there would be no way to really self-correct unless you were using, obviously, context. But even then, with this type of word, for the first-time reader, it'd be a big jump to guess that this is light. Anyway, so
here what I can see is that there's that little symbol, and I'm sure you're going to tell me what it is, that little glyph on the I that tells us it's going to be an I sound. And then I know the GH are not pronounced, so I can immediately say light. And when I say light, then I connect it.
Right, exactly. So that's I spy glyph.
I spy with my little eye. Excellent.
So we think of it as like training wheels actually for reading. The markings are support for accurate and confident decoding until they're no longer needed. And so our online program enables students and teachers actually to turn off and on the phonetic markings as needed. But what happens is, as students learn the system, they're really, especially struggling readers who've struggled for years, what they get is they start to break the code. They start to realize like, oh, English. So letters make more than one sound, and not every letter is pronounced. And with the syllable breaks already in there for them, that just the visual of that syllable break helps them later, even in standard English, to chunk out the words. But what's happening is the kids are like, oh, I can do this. There's like a whole attitude shift towards the language when they realize that it's not them, and their word attacks, their confidence and their tenacity with word attack grows immensely, and then they stick to it, and they feel like they can do this. And so just getting them on the page with that open attitude starts to they start to build their sight word base because they're still seeing the word spelled correctly. And so there's a real shift, and that's where the translation from readable English to standard English has proven pretty seamless in a lot of ways.
Yeah, and that's when you talk about developing it as a sight word, what we know is as we learn to read, we go through that phonological stage where we try to sound everything out. And then as we build up frequency with a particular word, it becomes a sight word. And so this enables, because the word's there, the word yacht is there, and then it becomes a sight word, and then we don't need the glyphs because we're not actually sounding it out at some point, or the graying out.
Right.
It helps it just because it's still there, you can still build on it as a sight word with just those prompts at that phonological stage.
Right. And I guess here's where we could talk about cognitive load as well. I mean, imagine the cognitive load of having to, remember all the sounds, the 42 sounds that we learn, the standard sounds, and then all the exceptions, that there's just not it's not consistent enough. And so really you have to have enough of a sight word base before the cognitive load decreases,
Yes, right.
So until then, and then how do you get that sight word base? Well, it's time on the page, it's exposure, it's reading in context and developing over time. But if you're struggling, you're not developing over time because you're not reading, you're not on the page. And so the cognitive load is just immense for beginning readers and for the struggling readers. And so this reduces the cognitive load by breaking the code for you. Really, all you're having to remember is that little glyph right there. The rest is pretty, and this, obviously the standard sound. So the way we teach the glyphs are through these little videos.
So this is happy face. Looks like a pretty happy
like
face.
In our word technique and recipe.
Happy. Okay, so would you like me to play that video now?
Yeah, that's great.
Happy face. Happy face reminds us of our smile when we say E. Whenever you see happy face, it will always make the same sound, E, like in the words me, taxi, and happy.
Oops.
Happy face.
I don't need to do it again, do I?
Nope.
Okay.
So each of the videos, so there's basically 21 of these glyphs, and it makes over 99.9% of the words in English phonetic. And that's out of the over 100,000 words I have marked up in the Readable English system. And so the 21 glyphs we teach with these videos, we have a body movement and a song. So if you want to play the song, Betsy, there's a little jingle for each one as well.
All right. I'd rather play it than sing it. So here we go. No, unavailable.
Oh, no. Okay.
No,
Well, I'll sing it, I guess. It's put on a happy face, E. Put on a happy face, E. And you're doing the body movement at the same time. So each glyph has its own song and body movement. And then each glyph also, we tried to make them really as intuitive as possible so that they look like they sound, or there's some connection to the shape, the sound. So and then the name of the glyph has the sound in it as well. So each glyph name has the sound of the glyph in it. So happy face obviously has the E in happy.
And all of us are going to be singing that song the rest of the day.
Some of them are
sticks with you, doesn't it?
Pretty catchy. Some of them are. All right, so there's one more example of another glyph. So if the name of the glyph is in the sound, and this glyph is clearly called unicorn, what do you imagine the sound of this glyph is going to be? So just hold that and let's play it and see if you're right.
Unicorn. Unicorn makes the sound U, like in its name, unicorn. Whenever you see unicorn, it will always make the same sound U, like in the words few and cute.
I guessed right the first time when I saw it. Oops, no, it's good. I don't want to do that again. Just need to do this. All right, there we go.
All right, let's see if that song plays.
Do you believe in unicorns? You.
I believe in unicorns.
Yeah.
You.
Yeah. So the unicorn, obviously, the shape you can see over here is the unicorn
horn.
Horn. Yeah, there we go. All right. So let's go ahead. So like I said, there's 21 of these glyphs, and they're pretty fun to teach. The kids, we've got basically kids of all ages using this, and I'm just blown away by the middle schoolers that, after some coaxing, really have gotten into this and really like some of the songs. And they, I don't know if you remember, Betsy, but one girl had a unicorn hat. And so all of a sudden her unicorn hat all had a whole new meaning when she was wearing it to school. And there's a glyph called Hey April, and the body movement is a straight waving. And so they would sing the Hey April and wave across campus to each other, the students and the teachers that were doing the program. And just a lot of fun to bring singing and, body movement. Of course, we want the total, what do they call it? Total body recall or total body response, right? To bring the kinesthetic in. And one of the things is, this is meant to be fun. It's meant to be bring some ease and pleasure and fun into learning. And so it's a blast to train teachers and have them all singing and dancing.
Now, so I can imagine, it takes us a while to learn our letters, but kids learn them pretty quickly, usually, and whether they're starting in pre-K or kindergarten or even first grade. How long does it typically take kids to learn 21 glyphs?
There's a range. We've had kids learn all the glyphs in a couple of weeks, when they're meeting, depending on how much time, if they've got half an hour or 45 minutes or an hour a day, or if it's 3 days a week or 2 days, that kind of thing. But we all, there's one study I'm going to show you where kids were learning 3 glyphs in in an hour in a week. So in 7 weeks, they learned all the glyphs. But we had one group learn them all in 3 weeks at an hour, 45 minutes a day, 5 days a week.
So that gets them into actually then reading and sounding out words pretty quickly.
Yeah. And we try to bring in the reading, word recognition at least, and the application of these glyphs through word lists and sentences, so that they can actually see this in action, the glyphs sort of in action. So in this, so once they've learned the glyphs, basically, that like phase 1 is learning the glyphs, and then phase 2 is getting your materials in the font, or the Readable English font, basically. So we have a conversion tool, which this is a little video actually that just demonstrates how quickly we have a little e-reader that can take documents and convert them into readable.
So whatever it is you wanted to read in class.
Yeah, exactly.
Your Valentine's message or something. All right, here, I'll play that.
So it's really almost this quick. If you were to cut and paste a document into this, I think we can do up to like 2,500 words or something like that, or 1,000. It's quite a big document. That's just cutting and pasting, and it'll show up in the students in their personal e-readers on the website, or you can import PDFs and have bigger documents converted as well. So the whole idea is, why teach all this if you can't get if you can't get your materials in readable English? So this conversion tool is really phase 2 of the program, where not only do we teach the glyphs, now it's getting them on the page to get that practice, right? And get that sight word development and word attack, and then basically we want to get them decoding so that we can get to comprehension, right? We read for meaning. That's why we read. We don't read just to decode. So getting them on the page is half the struggle. Now we're being able to work on comprehension. We're not struggling with the decoding piece anymore. There's more left. There's more left there to now start, comprehending what we're reading. So this is just a little demonstration of sharing. You can share your documents with your students. We can go through this one. You can go to the next slide. So there's a way to share with your students. Here it is, yeah. So this is a little video of just, inside the e-reader, some of this functionality. Like, a lot of students like to start with Readable English and then click on words that they turn off the glyphs on words. So they click on words they already know and turn off the markup. Or is it not playing?
No, I was waiting for you to.
Oh yeah, no, go ahead.
Go ahead. All right.
So there's just all kinds of being able to adjust the font color, size, spacing. We don't have this where you can turn off the separate levels, but you can turn off all of Readable English or turn it all on and then just click on words you like. This, in this case, there's no Readable English, and then you just click on the words you don't know, or students can start with all Readable English and click off the words they do know, so that they can start to turn off the, this would be for like older students who have enough
practice where they
exactly.
know which words they are
exactly
good at. Okay.
Nope.
Oops. Let's see it again. It was so interesting the first time. I didn't know you could do all those colors too.
Yeah, it's kind of, we tried to add a lot of accessibility stuff in there. So there's all in Readable English, and you can click, I know this word. And there's also, you can click on the word to get the definition and hear the word spoken to you. Or you can,
Start without it and then choose the
yeah,
words you want.
yeah.
Oh,
And that's also what helps transition out of dependency on the glyphs. But so far, we haven't had anybody, there's been no needing to unlearn anything. That was a question that came up with one reading specialist, that students would have to unlearn the system. And that hasn't been the case because the spelling's kept intact. And, really when you're reading, they're going for the meaning. They're not stuck. They don't get stuck on the glyphs at all. In fact, they more often ignore them. So it's kind of been an interesting experiment,
well, like when something becomes a sight word, it's
Right.
automatic. It's just
Right,
there
exactly.
so you can't, there's nothing to unlearn.
Right.
The word is the word. Yeah.
Exactly.
Very cool.
So we did a study in Australia, in Sydney, at a school. And this was a year 2 school, or they call it year 2. We call it second grade. And we had 60 participants. So we had 3 classes, one control group and a test group. And so two of the classes were readable English and one was a control group. And they met half an hour a week, twice a week. So really only 1 hour a week for 12 weeks. So over the course of 3 months. And this was just a full general classroom. And the control group had just their regular classroom reading instruction. And we pre and post tested kids basically using the Gray oral reading test. And what we found was the kids in the Readable English doubled the scores of the kids in the control group by double, or I just said that, they doubled, and in months. So the kids in the Readable English group went up in reading accuracy 10.7 months in those 3 months, whereas the kids in the control group went up only 5.3 months. And the same with comprehension. We didn't even work on comprehension, but the kids went up 9.8 months in Readable English versus the control group. Now, this was with the Readable English markup, right? So we know that the markup helped these kids. And so these were the groups they learned the 3 glyphs in a half an hour. And then the second half an hour in that week, they just played games. So they were either doing our little games on the apps, or they were doing little worksheets, so there was a variety of materials they used to reinforce those 3 glyphs for that week.
So that's another thing that you mentioned, the ability to take your existing materials, like existing classroom or readers or whatever, and converting them. But within the Readable English system, there's a lot of practice materials also that that they can read.
Yeah. Yep.
Were the control groups, there's a question here actually, were the control groups given the same time as the Readable English group?
Yes, they were having the same exact time in their curriculum or their reading instruction.
Okay, I'm just typing the answer in here, and then it will be there later. Okay.
So then we did a sight word reading test, and the kids in the Readable English, and this was actually this was a reading accuracy rate improvement in words read correctly per minute, and the kids in the Readable English group read 25 more words correctly per minute than the control group, than they did in the pretest, and the control group improved only by 11 words per. So this is where we started to realize, it translates, to standard English.
Mm-hmm.
So we did, so that study that I just told you about was done a few years ago when we were really just trying to see how this worked. And so this was a school that we're in right now in French Lick, Indiana, where we had about 50 kids all together in this, and we had kids in the Title I pull-out programs with Get Readable English for, grade 1, 2, and 3. And you can see that these kids started learning Readable English, I think, in late January that year, and they went until May. And this was the kind of improvements that their expected improvement, as you can see, versus what they actually did. So and this is basically in reading fluency, your rate, accuracy, fluency, and comprehension, as you can see. So their rate went up, not as much, not as fast, but their accuracy went way up, like their accuracy, fluency, and their comprehension. So the comprehension, like I said, it's not something that we were focusing on at all. It was just basically the decoding. The grade 2, we had a real superstar teacher there who was very enthusiastic in teaching this. She actually spent less time. She got started about 3 weeks later than the other two, but had the most improvement, as you can see. So we had pretty tremendous results there. That school now has all their first grade kids using it. So they're just teaching it across the board to all their first graders.
And how does this meld with a more traditional phonics programs that people have in place where kids start by learning the standard sounds of letters and things like that?
Well, I think it goes well because we need to learn the standard sounds, so that could remain the same. It's when the words don't play by the rules, right? It's when we start teaching all the exceptions, that's where you would bring Readable English in.
So in this case, were those first graders really learning they had started to learn or had already learned their standard sounds?
Most of these, yeah, because it was the second half of they had learned their standard sounds by this point. Enough so, enough. They learned them, they had enough. And like I said, these were the Title I kids that were struggling. They were stable enough with their standard sounds to go ahead and start learning the Readable English. One of the things that some of my schools are finding is that the Title I teachers have actually never gotten to a point where they've taught the kids to actually get on the page and read, and they're left like, well, now what do I do?
And what do you tell them?
Well, it's, I was really surprised by that, like thinking that there was this full-on reading curriculum. So what we've talked about is the tool that converts the documents into Readable English. They can take stories from like ReadWorks. There's a great online program that has lots of reading materials and stories and historical passages and all that kind of stuff with good comprehension. Like and it's all free. They convert all that into Readable English. And then we talked about doing their literacy circles where they can, study an article and then work on the comprehension and then work on writing. They can just do what they would normally do if you were a regular class. Move into the comprehension and writing, basically.
But they actually get to that where they...
Yeah, they actually get to it now. So this is our middle school results. We had a 8th grade special ed teacher who was just desperate. She was going to retire because she was so depressed that she was sending 8th graders off to high school who couldn't read, and she just got really tired of, basically being ineffectual with her students. And so she was just desperate when she found out about this. She was just willing to try it. I didn't even train her. She just got in there, got into the website, learned the system, and then just created the materials for herself and just took off with these kids. And so that she started to have such good results with it that other teachers were seeing a change in these kids, and they're like, what are you doing? Because these kids are different kids. And so the grade 6 teacher came and said, well, I want to teach it to my group. So in this case, the grade 6 growth, this grade 8 was a group of 15 special ed kids. But the grade 6 is a whole classroom of students. So anyway, they do the iReady test there, and they found that 100% of the kids, the 8th grade group, had already achieved their yearly growth target within 9 months. And on average, they exceeded their growth target by 313%. It was the biggest growth in the school. And so they were really celebrated. And these kids were getting awards for the first time in their life for having, exceeded their growth. And it's really made a big impact on this school. In fact, they've got, a third of their kids on using Readable English now. Almost a third of the school is using Readable English now. And the grade 6 also just really, 87% of the students had already achieved their growth within 9 months. And they, on average, exceeded their yearly growth target by 115%. Whereas the control group, look at the control group, only 40% of the students had achieved their yearly growth target.
And that's you see that all the time and often if you look at reading scores within a given class, there's this big disparity. You've got the kids who are reading, just fine, way above grade level, and then you've got the group that are just struggling and have trouble making progress. So we have another question, actually, which might make sense at this point, and there's a concern that at least in some places in the U.S., teachers are very limited as to what they can teach because there's mandatory testing every week. So how would you see this system fitting into a rigid structure of the reading classroom?
It's a good question. I don't know. Teachers have to be creative, like they've got to find that. I was talking to one teacher about she had kids come in for study group. She really wanted to use this in this middle school because she just knew it was going to be. And we were just talking about, what if you took 15 minutes and taught one glyph? Just show them the video and then show them all the materials that go with that, and just one glyph at a time for 15 minutes. And, over the course of however many days that would take to learn the 21 glyphs and kind of put it all together, there is an accumulative effect. And again, it's something that for English language learners or the struggling readers, that it starts to break the code. And there is something about that. I don't know. I think kids who've been struggling for a long time get relief. Relief. It's not just them that's struggling. It's not, it's not their fault. This really is a tough language. And so I don't know. I think you'd have to be creative to fit it in somehow, but it could be done.
But even breaking it, as you said, into those smaller pieces and taking 10 or 15 minutes of your reading time over time, really you could build up and do that. And you'd likely start, as they start to make those transitions and create those sight words and being able to pronounce things, you're going to see, you might start to see the performance on those weekly tests start to increase.
Yeah. And I also
maybe
think
not as fast as if you could do this in a very concentrated way, but
right.
Even within a strict structure, you might.
I've also wondered about, what if, we're working towards being able to turn on and off the glyphs so that you can print them, so that really you could. So we're working on that, but it's not available just yet. But I always wondered, what if you just give the students their materials in Readable English? The spelling is there, the syllable breaks are there, the silent letters could help, and just ignore the glyph till you learn it, and who knows how quickly they might absorb those sounds just by getting that kind of those visual cues. And so just a quick side note here, we tried to do this study with Indiana University with the neuroscience department. They were going to do brain scans on the pre and post brain scans for a reading program for this at the Boys and Girls Club. So it was a couple summers ago. And it didn't really work out. The kids didn't show up. It was just not, it wasn't. But the two kids showed up for the post brain scans. And I got a call from Dr. James, and she said, "Oh, I got good news. We did the post scan on one of the boys, and we showed him readable English, and all the reading portions of his brain lit up when he was looking at readable English." And I was like, "Oh, good." I was so relieved because we really saw good results just working with the kids. And anyway, so I said, "What's the kid's name?" And she told me, and he wasn't even one of our students. This guy didn't even get readable English, but just seeing readable English, the reading portions of his brain lit up. I mean, I don't know what to say about how to account for that other than the cognitive load or just the sort of visual stimulation. Something happened. And so that's what makes me wonder if just getting from the get-go, get your materials in readable English, that would be a way to start too and see what happens.
Right. Interesting. Yeah. A lot more research could be done on that area.
Yeah, for sure.
That would be fascinating.
So speaking of cognitive load, the father of cognitive load, John Sweller, who's in Australia, he's at the University of New South Wales. He's a big fan of readable English for all the reasons that we've talked about. And so we have an endorsement from him, and we are working to get studies done with him actually in Australia.
Yeah, this reminds me that I should comment that this does originally come out of Australia, and while she lives in the U.S., I spent a lot of time in Australia, and the company that where this was originally co-founded with her is in Australia. And I always like to mention at this point that education is the second largest export of Australia, which most people don't know.
And yeah, and we've got a few awards.
Yeah, not
nice.
surprisingly.
Yeah. And some testimonials.
Well, the one, if you mentioned that middle school teacher who was ready to retire.
Oh yeah.
Maybe you could comment a little bit on what happened after she started using readable English with her students.
So she started using readable English, and her life has turned around. She is so excited to get to work now. She shows up like an hour early. She gets to work at like 6:30 because she can't wait to get the day started. And she really feels like her life has meaning, and she cries every time we talk to her. And she's so grateful, but she said that she doesn't plan on retiring now for another 10 years. Even though her friends are reaching retirement age now. She's like, nope, I got 10 more years now. It's really sweet. So basically, I think this is pretty much the last slide here, but the way it's implemented, you can see we've got a website with online lessons for learning the glyphs, and then we have reading practice modules that has like leveled reading passages with comprehension questions that are really well thought out, sort of higher order, geared towards higher order thinking skills. We have the e-reader with the bookstore, and we got the videos and glyph songs. And so there's a whole array of things to do in the website, but we also have apps that are free. The Choose or Lose and the What's Changed app. The Choose or Lose develops sort of the glyph learning, and it has the most common syllables, so you can learn the most common syllables that are marked up in readable English, and then the most common words as well. And then the What's Changed app develops phonemic awareness, and it's based on my Linda Mood Bell experience. And we also have, there's a skill building app in the website called Missing Word that helps once you've learned the glyphs, again, get to reading and comprehension. And then we have everything also available as an offline resource. So we have a scripted teaching guide, we have worksheets and printable games and activities. And so the blend of the online, the apps, and the worksheets and games and board games and bingo and all flashcard games and that kind of stuff. The combination of that is actually really, it's fun and kids really respond to it. So that's basically how the materials we have to teach the program.
So I want to read to you that the person who's been, Ria, who has been asking the questions, has added an additional comment. She says, listening to you and thinking, I came up with a quick method to include this. I'm so excited. We always had morning meeting and did mini lessons with the calendar, etc. Why couldn't we put the glyph of the day or week in front of the kids, do the activities for it, and put up some of the words? That would work in just a few minutes.
Yep, that's brilliant.
What a great idea.
Yeah, excellent.
Okay.
Yeah, really good idea. That school, Springs Valley, they requested posters. We have a poster with all the glyphs on it, big size poster, and they wanted other stuff to put all over school, all over the campus, so that everybody was sort of included and gets on board with it. So that would, I want to tell them about what you suggested, so that maybe the whole school could start learning it pretty easily with a glyph of the day.
Yeah, well, often people do something to get the thinking started. They'll do a little mini problem or something like this. But that would be a great time. And there's all those passing times and lining times, and if you really take advantage of those to practice it. And you talked about the kids singing songs from waving at each other across campus, singing Hey April. Well, sing Hey April while you're getting in line. Sing Unicorn. Do you believe in unicorns? You. It can all work then.
And the thing is, like right now, I don't know if you can see on the screen here. Oops. Just stay here for a second. There's a couple of board games. You can see that worm. It's called Squirmy Worm. That's a board game. And there's Hook, Line, and Sinker is a game right behind that. These are board games that have the glyphs on it. So like we basically have a board game for every 3 glyphs. And so, I was working with these 6 years old at the Boys and Girls Club, and we'd go through 3 glyphs. They'd learn the body movement, the song, and the video, but, it wasn't stable as far as the, knowing the visual, putting it all together, basically. So we play the board game, we pair up in 2s. And so, you roll the dice and you move your man and you land, and you have to say the name of the glyph and the sound of the glyph and maybe do the song or body movement or whatever you want them to do. And by the end of that game, these kids could get all the 3 glyphs like that. It was really fun to watch, and it was a really fun way to reinforce. There's also tic-tac-toe. That's another way where they have to say, but so if they did 3 in a week and then played games, that would be, in 7 weeks, you'd have your glyph knowledge.
Yeah, great. Okay, so we have about 5 minutes left, it looks like, which is time for another question or two, if anybody has them. Another question. Okay, now just another comment, really. She's a multiple intelligence advocate and appreciates that the activities for the method use so many areas of the brain. They're being exposed to it and, really helping them get to learning and mastery.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Yep.
Exactly right. All right, I'm going to check the chat also and see if we have any comments there. I don't see any. All right, well, go ahead. Feel free to go ahead and type any questions that you have. Very often also we find that sometimes there are questions afterwards that you don't think of and would like to know about them later. So what we've provided here is our contact information. You can reach me and you can reach Anne, and we'll be happy to follow up with any additional information that you would find helpful. And I'll check one more time. No, I don't see anything there. Check both places. Nope. All right. Well, we will go ahead and wrap up then. We want to thank you very much for, I'll put the contact information back up so everybody can see that. Thank you very much. Again, we were recording today, so that recording should be available probably later today. We'll send out a link to that, and encourage your colleagues who may have been interested in this topic but weren't able to attend to take a look at it. And once again, we look forward to continuing the conversation and seeing how we can help you support your students in becoming confident and enthusiastic learners and readers. And Anne, thanks so much for joining us today. We really, really appreciate it.
Thank you, Betsy. Thanks, everyone.
All right, have a great day.
Bye-bye.